You want to make sure that all gasket surfaces are clean. Do not use anything abrasive or anything that will damage the surface, because then it will leak. And it's good to clean out all the threaded holes also. Some of the mounting bolts might also have a sealant on them, so it's good to clean those threads off and put fresh sealant on them. On the timing cover, there's the crankshaft seal that has to be removed. You can knock that out from the back side. There is a special tool, or you can use a pipe that fits this, or a punch or screwdriver, and knock that out. Careful so you don't damage any of this surface. The new seal will get pressed in from the front of the timing cover. It's best to put some type of lube on here and then press it in using a special tool, or possibly a 2x4, pressing evenly around this edge. There's a lip or an edge right here in the bore, so when you press it in, it's only going to go that far. So right about to where this line is that you see on here. One way to press the seal in is to put in a vise with a board on the front and back, so you can press it parallel. The seal that connects from the oil pan to the timing cover doesn't appear to be damaged, so I'm just going to reuse that. But I am going to put a little RTV in these corners. I'm going to put a little permatex thread sealant on the bolts for the timing cover, since they go into a water jacket and I don't want them to leak. This crankshaft seal here needs to be concentric with the dampener. There's a couple of ways you can do that. One, there's a sleeve you can put on here and to use that to align the timing cover, or you can put the bolts in finger tight, and then when you put the harmonic balancer in, loosen them to make sure it's centered, and then tighten them. These bolts get tightened to 30 foot-pounds, and the two bottom ones that go into the oil pan are tightened to 215 inch-pounds. The new water pump came with the new bypass tube, so I'm going to install that next. Now I'm going to install the water pump and new gasket. I'm going to put some thread sealer on these bolts also. Torque the bolts to 30 foot-pounds, and you should torque them in a crisscross pattern to avoid warping the water pump. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Next I'm going to put these two brackets back on the timing cover studs. The smaller one goes on first on the lower bolt, and then this one goes on both bolts. And then replace the two nuts. Next I'm going to put the harmonic balancer on. On the crankshaft there's a key right there, and that has to line up, with the keyway and the balancer. And you want to put a little lube around here before you press it on. That will protect the seal, and then also some on the inside to make it easier to slide over the crankshaft. Now you can use the large crank bolt to pull it on the rest of the way. I wedged a punch through this large hole in the balancer, and then it gets torqued to 135 foot-pounds. And now the pulley goes on with 6 bolts. The 6 pulley bolts to 17 foot-pounds. Remove the heater tube from the old water pump. You may have to spray with something to get it to release, and then just twist it out. Remove the old O-ring from the heater tube and replace with a new one. Make sure the bypass hose is fully seated, and then slip the hose clamp back on. Replace the lower radiator hose onto the water pump. And then slide the hose clamp back on. Now I'm going to install the accessory bracket. Accessory bolts. And I had one on this bracket on top, and don't forget the one behind the idler wheel. Replace the heater hose onto the heater tube. And then slide the hose clamp on. Next I'm going to install the shroud and the fan. You'll want to put the two on together. Once you have the fan started onto the water pump so it's secure, then you can put the bolts back in the fan shroud. In the 4 bolts for the shroud, 2 on each side. Next, replace the radiator overflow tank. There's some tabs here on top and bottom that line up in these slots, and then just push down. Windshield wiper fluid reservoir. Down on the bottom there's a little tab that goes into a slot. At the top, line up these 2 tabs in their slots, and then push inward and down at the same time. The old water pump had a bolt-on pulley, so I could use this wrench to hold the pulley while I was removing the fan clutch nut. The water pump has a press-on pulley, and it has 4 holes that you can use a spanner wrench on. I've used this wrench and I drilled and tapped 3 holes to put bolts in that line up with the 3 holes in the pulley. So now with my spanner wrench placing the holes in the pulley and my 36mm wrench, I can tighten up this fan nut. Now I'm going to put the alternator on. Just pull, get the nut on the back. And then there's one up here. And now put the AC compressor back in place. And then put the bracket on the back, tighten those 3 bolts, and there's 2 more up front. And then on this alternator bracket, there's a ground cable, goes on this stud, and then a nut on top. Then replace the upper radiator hose. Next, you can put the serpentine belt on. Make sure that it's centered on all the pulleys and the grooves. And you can always refer to the belt routing if you don't remember how it goes. Plug in the cables for the AC. This one snaps on, and this one snaps together. Now put the air cleaner in place. Make sure it's snapped into this little embossment here. Make sure it's fully seated, and then tighten this screw on the hose clamp. And then plug this hose back into the air cleaner. And then replace the intake hose. Replace the lower radiator hose and hose clamp. And then reconnect the negative battery cable. Then refill the system with coolant. And it's probably a good idea to change the oil in case any contaminants got in there. Once you have the system full of coolant, you'll want to spin the water pump over about a dozen times. If you already have the serpentine belt off, just take the tension off of it so that it spins freely, and then turn the water pump over. The reason for this is it uses the coolant in the system to create a seal and also to lube the bearing. If you don't do this, then when you start it up, it's high RPM on dry bearings and it can damage your water pump. So just spin it over about a dozen times should do it. After that, you can start it up and let it warm up and check all radiator hoses and surfaces for leaks.